Okay, hi guys, this is the first workshop in the Mathematas series, so I'm looking forward to working with you on this. This workshop is really just going to be focusing on drawing, the activity of drawing. We're not going to be producing anything 3D in this workshop. We're going to start with some sort of simple drawing exercises to warm us up, followed by a slightly longer drawing, and then we're going to be moving to produce what we call a pounced image, or pricked and pounced, which is the other term for the process. So the idea behind this workshop is it's going to get us sort of thinking a little bit more about the actual physical process of drawing, or the physical act of drawing. And this pounce image, which we'll be making, involves this particular technique, which is actually a Renaissance technique, which we'll talk a bit more about in a moment. But hopefully through sort of that process, that transferal of one image via this method of pouncing, you're going to be, again, becoming very conscious of like your hands in the process, the physical act, the physical translation. I find in my own work, because I'm often making moulds of things and then making investment moulds and then moving it into cast metal objects, I find that sort of transferring one thing through lots of different media is actually quite an interesting way of working, and it definitely makes you think a lot more about sort of yourself, space, material generally. So that's sort of the idea behind today's workshop. So as I say, mainly a drawing workshop today, and we'll just run over quickly the things that you're going to need for the activity. Obviously, to start with, drawing paper, drawing pad of paper, sketch pad for actually doing some sketches, and also possibly worth having some additional sheets of a slightly thinner paper if you can get hold of that, or just sort of an average piece of A4. This is quite a thick card, which will be good for your pounced pictures and general sketching, but obviously we're going to be transferring the image, so we'll want a thinner piece of paper for that particular exercise. You should also have been given some graphite powder. It might not be in a big pot like this, but we'll need that for a later exercise. The dry point needle will be required for the pounced image, and you're also going to need some paintbrushes for transferring the graphite later on. Pens and pencils, obviously, to do your sketches too. And also, if you have it, some fixer for the graphite, because obviously it's going to be quite loose once we've brushed it onto the image in the final exercise. You may also want to fix your other drawings, although, as I say, we're trying to not be too precious about the sketches that we make early on in this workshop. If you don't have a professional fixer, you could actually just use hairspray. It's another really good way of fixing graphite or any kind of pencil drawings. So I think it's probably a good time to talk very briefly about what the process of pouncing actually is. You should have a worksheet which kind of loosely outlines what I'm going to say here, and I will talk about it very briefly because obviously we want to get on to the activity. But basically a pounced image was a particular way of Renaissance artists transferring their sketches to the final surface that they would be working on. So artists like Michelangelo, Raphael, these artists would have used this to basically translate the cartoon, which is the term for the sort of preliminary sketch that they're working on, to the canvas, or if they're working on a fresco, maybe to the wall, and to get the sort of basic outline of that image transferred over so they could then mark it out, flesh it out, and begin the process of actually finishing the image. And basically this would be achieved by pressing with a pin or a sharp object dots through and along the lines of the cartoon. So you're basically creating a little tiny hole at a regular interval around the original drawing. And this sort of pounced template could be taken to the new surface, laid on top, and through those tiny pinholes they would brush through graphite, and it would basically create like a very, very light outline of the previously created sketch. And this was a way of them, I suppose, before they had sort of printers or copiers, of doing as close a copy of the sort of confirmed or selected drawing to then take it over to the final piece of work that they were working on. And obviously some of the pieces that people were working on in this period were absolutely enormous. There'd be a number of different sketches being sort of taken over and transferred each time. I've used this method myself to actually produce sort of finished drawings, because I find that I quite like the effect of the, I suppose you could think about it a little bit like pixels actually, just sort of like a really archaic pixelated image. So from far away you're going to read it as sort of outline or tone, depending on how dark and how many dots you're putting in, and then close up it's going to be revealed that it's actually just made of a lot of tiny little dots. So yeah, thinking about pixels, thinking maybe even about pointillism, which is a much later movement, with other artists sort of like Seurat sort of working in that way. But yeah, our primary focus here is this sort of Renaissance process of transferring one image to another surface. So I'd like to begin the session, as I say, with a couple of warm-up drawings. We can do this either in pen or pencil, however you feel most comfortable. It's just really about us sort of getting back into the mindset of drawing, sketching, and taking note of our environment through this medium. So we're going to begin with a 1-minute sketch, and we're going to follow this with a 2-minute sketch. Again, not precious pictures. No one's going to see these. They're just for you to sort of get into the mindset, I suppose. And I will time those for you and give a bit of an indication when to start and when to stop. And then once we've done those sort of warm-up sketches, we're going to go for a sort of longer 15-minute drawing, which is what we'll then use to produce our pounced image to the other side. Okay, so we'll start with the 1-minute drawing. I'm going to time it on my phone. If you have a phone, feel free to set a timer yourself, but as I say, I will interject when it's time to stop. And I think the best thing to start is maybe if you're in a room with a window, maybe focus something outside the window, focus something in the room, but we're again just sketching just to get started. So for the next sort of minute, if you just do a quick sketch, however you feel comfortable recording that information. So we're about halfway through the first minute sketch. Okay, so that's about a minute. So if you stop here now, as I say, these are just warm-up sketches, so they really don't need to be precious or the best drawings that you've ever undertaken in your life. Now we're going to do our 2-minute sketch. If you were looking out the window or looking somewhere in the room, maybe swap over. If you want to choose to focus perhaps on an object instead of an entire scene, just to, again, it's just a warm-up exercise. So these are not drawings that we're keeping, showing or celebrating. It really doesn't matter if you don't like it at the end of it. So again, if you want to time it yourself, you can, but I will also pop a timer on the screen now. So starting a 2-minute sketch, pen, pencil, however you want to do this, it's just to get those sort of muscles working. So again, nothing precious, just getting as much information down as we can. If you want to just do the outline of something, a crosshatch. Also, if you'd like to, you could change the item that you're focusing on. We're about halfway through the 2-minute session now. So coming up to the last 20 seconds on this picture. Okay guys, that's about 2 minutes. So some warm-up drawings there. As I say, nothing precious. This is just about getting those sort of muscles working again, starting to sort of get into the mindset of sketching. Okay, so hopefully everyone's feeling a little bit more warmed up now, having taken those sort of, quick sketches to start with. And we're going to move on to the sort of the image that we're actually going to be working on as part of our pounced image. So what you draw now will be the picture that you lay your sheet over and start to sort of pinpoint and transfer. And so I was going to make a suggestion that you either pick something in the room, again an object to focus on that you find interesting. Remember, we're going to be working in a way that sort of you're probably going to want quite strong contours or lines in your drawing, but equally there's ways of getting tonal detail transferred in this process too. It's just going to be more abstracted. So something with high contrast, maybe a strong outline against a white background is quite useful. The other suggestion is that perhaps you may want to treat this as a portrait exercise, because as I mentioned, we're sort of thinking about our own sort of physical presence in this by focusing so much on the physical act of drawing. So if you have a small mirror and you want to spend sort of this next drawing focused on your own portrait, that might also be an interesting topic for you to then transfer. Now, if you have decided to use a pen, that also can produce some quite interesting outcomes in this process. Obviously, I would imagine that you're going to be cross-hatching to get sort of the shadow in your image. And if you remember that this process relies on us following lines, cross-hatching as a method of creating shadow in an image can translate really well in a pounced drawing. Alternatively, if you're using a pencil to sort of build up tone, we'll be able to recreate that by just increasing the number of dots that we're pushing through in that area, so don't panic. Either way, it's going to produce a really interesting outcome. I would recommend not going larger than a sort of A4 sheet of paper for this drawing, because as I say, we're going to be transferring it. You've got to make sure that the picture that you create is going to fit onto the final sheet you're transferring to. So if you're working on a really large A3 picture but you want to scale it down to an A4 picture, possibly not a good idea. Obviously it's going to take you longer to transfer Prick and Pounce, so maybe start A4 size, scale up to an A3 sheet rather than starting large and trying to scale down, because it's going to be transferring sort of as a 1-to-1 ratio scale wise. As I say, you can work with pencil or in pen, but obviously keep in mind that we do want to try and find, something with shadow and contrast as a subject. Now don't worry if you're not totally happy with what you've produced so far. Remember, we're going to be translating this image through this pouncing method, so it's going to look very different, or you'll have the opportunity to amend it in that process. So I'm going to change the angle of the camera now and give you a little bit of a demonstration of how I translate using this particular method, ways that you can make an image darker or lighter, and also just to give you an idea of the effect that you're going to be producing. Now, I've got this very, very crude drawing here with a couple of mugs. I'm hoping yours is going to have been a bit more in detail. I've got one in pencil and one in pen, because I'm assuming there's going to be a mix of different media in that respect within the group. I've also got this, as I mentioned, slightly thinner, just regular piece of A4 paper, which kind of important. If you can lay it over your drawing and just about see through, that's going to be a massive help, because obviously you're not going to be able to see the contours of the drawings if there's anything thicker than that. I've also, as I mentioned, got a slightly larger piece of paper to actually put this drawing onto. I think it's helpful if you can, although don't panic if you've only got A4 and you're transferring onto A4, but it is helpful if you can have a larger sheet of paper to sort of reposition the drawing on. It just helps to make a neater composition. And if you want to kind of keep this drawing or mount it or use it in a portfolio project, it could be helpful if you've actually got it sort of laid out on a slightly bigger sheet. What I'm going to do is lay my slightly thinner sheet of paper over the top. I don't know if you can see, but I can actually see through the drawing just about to my image on the other side. Now you should have a dry point etching needle. Unfortunately, because of the current delays with Royal Mail, I'm just going to be using a pin to do this, but you can use your etching dry point needle. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm just gradually pinpricking the image. So I'm going across the paper, and where I can see an outline or my drawing underneath, I'm just pressing through with the pin, making sure I go all the way through the transfer paper. I haven't stuck my piece of paper down, but I'm just holding it in place. So I realise it's actually quite difficult to see what I'm doing on the table, but if I hold the paper up to the light in the window, you can start to see that I'm just filling out those areas of shade, lots of little dots, starting to produce sort of clear lines by running along the outline of the object in the sketch. With the graphite, I'm putting it on my brush by dipping it in and then actually tapping the excess off, because you'll see it picks it up really, really easily, and you could end up with quite a lot on there, which can be a little bit difficult to work with. I have put my piece of paper onto the sheet that I want to transfer my image onto, and I'm basically brushing back and forth in a sort of diagonal direction, so going one way and then back the other way. And what's important about this is I want to make sure that I get all the graphite onto the image through the holes. I don't want there to be lots of graphite sat out on top of the transfer paper, because if that's the case, when I pull up the transfer paper, I'm more likely to spill it onto the picture underneath. Okay guys, so I've lifted up my transfer paper. These are my little cartoon mugs here. And obviously now, having brushed the graphite through, I will be fixing them using either, if you've got it, as I say, a fixative, or just hairspray is completely fine. So you want to spray this at a distance. You're just sort of lightly coating the surface, really. And I'll show you some other examples of pounced drawings I've done in the past to help with this. But if you wanted to make sections of your drawing darker, once you've got that first layer on and you fixed it, if you leave it a couple of minutes, you can actually take your transfer paper and put it over the image again and brush through more graphite, and that will obviously make sections darker. I've used that in the past to sort of make the outlines darker or fill out sort of central detail in an image. If you want to sort of really experiment with picking out areas, get a completely fresh piece of paper and actually just select areas from your drawing that you really want to emphasise. So maybe just the shadow in the corner or a particular part of texture. Play around with layering up the graphite at this point. But obviously remember, fix before and give a good minute before you come back with another sheet of paper to brush more graphite through. I'm going to start the timer now for 30 minutes, which is time for you to sort of pinprick your image, do a transfer of the graphite, and if you want to, pick out some areas and do an additional transfer just to get some real contrast in your final picture. Okay guys, so hopefully this has been an interesting exercise and it's got you to think a little bit more about the physical act of drawing. We're going to spend sort of the last 5 minutes now with a couple of questions just for you to reflect on following the exercise. So I'll put these up as a slide. I'd like you to think a little bit about how comfortable you found the exercise, whether you think this is something that other people would enjoy or find difficult and why that might be. I want you to think a little bit about your relationship with your own drawings. So are they always something that has to be super important, something that you have to be proud of? And also just to have a think about the final image that you produced. Are you pleased with it? What aspects of it do you like? What aspects of it do you not like so much? So thanks for taking part today. I hope you're pleased with the outcome. I hope it's got you thinking about these things a little bit more. I look forward to seeing you in the next workshop.